today. I'm going to have a few of my cousins over on the next few weeks because we're going to talk today with Catherine Bennett about how to be tidy and organised. Catherine is a organisational expert. Is that what you call yourself, Catherine?
I'd say I'm a professional organiser and declutterer.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that. And I've been watching, I know a lot of people watching Marie Kondo. I've read her books. And because we're in this state of lockdown, I was really excited to get you on because I know a lot of people are suddenly faced with messy houses or having to rearrange their house because the kids are at home all the time, homeschooling, they're having to exercise at home. They're suddenly looking at their wardrobes or cupboards and thinking, I need to rearrange or reorganize all this mess and disorganization. So it's brilliant to have you on, Catherine. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for having me.
Very, very welcome. So first of all, what's the best place to start when you want to declutter? What's the best thing to do initially?
I think it will depend on each individual. It's usually where things are getting you down, or you're getting frustrated, or you're not wanting to use a space because you don't feel it's working well, or you just feel overwhelmed by being in that space. Okay.
And everybody's different. We were speaking before, weren't we, about different personality types. Some people can be naturally very organized, but perhaps, I don't know, they can't organize their business, or other people can be really messy in their house, but maybe they've got a certain organizational aspect elsewhere. So is there a general rule for everyone, or would you very much work with people individually on what they can do?
I think it is, again, very individual. Some people are naturally able to organise themselves, as you say. I think where you struggle more, having a system that works for you definitely can help, and having a place for everything.
Okay. So when people come to you, is it for lots of different reasons then?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, people may be just overwhelmed by having too much stuff. It could be that they've gone through a life change, maybe a bereavement, a divorce, they've had a family, or they're full swing into a family and just completely sort of consumed by life, and trying to keep on top of things can be very challenging. I also work with people who are also hoarders.
Right. Oh, that must be fascinating.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Did you get...
I think I lost you there for a minute. Sorry.
What do you? That must be really fascinating. What do you see when you go into a hoarder's house? Is it like on the TV shows where you literally can't walk in?
Yes, I have worked with people like that. I mean, hoarding disorder does fall into, it is now recognised as a mental health disorder. So that's a very different way of working with people to the other things I've just mentioned.
And why do people have this mental health disorder with hoarding? Is it like the opposite of OCD? Is it not being able to let go? Is it?
It is actually quite complex, and it varies as to why people end up in that situation. Right. But they often need more than one support to help them to manage and to sort of see a way through their hoarding issues.
So what do you do to help them then? And that must be really anxious or anxiety making for them to let it go. How do they go through that process?
Well, it is very challenging. I mean, I think even letting someone in your home when you are a hoarder is a huge step. So it's really important to go at their pace and to be respectful of what they consider is important. I've been working with a couple for 3 years now, as we've sort of gradually gone through their house, and I think that she would recognise that trauma and loss from her childhood has probably triggered her need to hold on to things. Yeah. So it's just taking one step at a time, one area at a time, as we gradually have sorted through the house together.
Why are they coming to you then? If this is a sort of coping mechanism for them, do they get to a certain stage where they're just like, actually, I can't even move in my house anymore?
I think it can be for many reasons. It's often the local authorities will become involved because if it becomes a
Wow.
hazard. So if
Wow.
there's an infestation,
Oh,
and so for the
wow.
neighbours that could be an issue.
Yeah.
In actual fact, the couple I work with, she's married. Her husband was struggling with that there was so much stuff in the house, so they had decided as a couple that they would tackle it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really interesting because even if you're not a hoarder or even if you don't have OCD, we all have to live with someone, don't we, if we're part of a family
Yeah,
or part of a
absolutely.
relationship. And that can be really challenging. And I think the things that people row about the most as couples or with their children is messiness or money. It's sort of those two things. Well, it is for me anyway. And I am naturally quite a messy person, but I'm also very organized. It's a bit confusing for me. I know maybe you can help me with that. Because Robbie is a very tidy person, but he will stuff everything in cupboards and all the cupboards will be a real mess. Whereas my cupboards are really tidy, but I don't mind mess on the outside because I can kind of see where everything is. So we both drive each other crazy, but we're also both a good balance when we get it right.
Yes.
So
I mean, I think if you're both very tidy, then your expectations could be so high, and everything's just so sort of neat and intense.
Yeah.
I think in most marriages or people living together, there's usually a mixture, and I
Yeah.
think that there's a compromise that you have to find in a way that works for you. But I would say that having a place for everything is really helpful. So when things are sort of scattered around, you actually know where to put things when you decide to sort of pick them up. Whereas if you are just picking things up and putting them in a space that you can find, it's harder to find things. And then we can often, there's a need to, you buy the same things again, or things just
Yes.
sort of go missing for a long period of time, or you're trying to get out of the house and you're dashing around looking for, your car keys, etc. So having a place for everything, even if it's not always in that place at that time, when you come to do the tidy up, you do know where to put things, and people don't need to ask you within the house where the batteries are kept, because they know where they're kept.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So so everyone's in lockdown at the moment, in isolation in most countries all around the world. If they're thinking, right, I need to start on this decluttering, say they're starting on their bedroom, what would you advise if you were going into somebody's room, or just as a general rule? I know everyone's slightly different, but where would you start? What would you do first?
Well, I mean, when I'm working with a client, I'd find out what it is that they're struggling with. So in a bedroom, if it was their clothing, what I would suggest, particularly in lockdown at the moment, there's a couple of things to think about before you start. And that is, if you are going to declutter, as we can't take anything to the charity shops or recycling at the moment,
Yeah.
we've got to think about where we're going to store those things. So if you're fortunate enough to have space to store things, I would suggest that as you do the decluttering, you bag up and mark out what's for charity, what's for recycling, what's for the tip, as you go along. So when we are, the lockdown's being lifted, the next step is just to put it in the car and take it to the designated place.
Yes.
And so that's one thing. If you don't have the space to store things, I would maybe suggest starting on smaller items or things that aren't going to accumulate, which is going to become an issue for you after the declutter.
Yeah.
But so going back to the bedroom, if we were starting in the bedroom, again, start small. Don't pull everything out, because
Yeah.
it is actually quite tiring and quite draining making decisions. So you don't want to sort of get everything out and then halfway through the pile you've sort of had enough, and then ending up shoving it all back in probably a worse state than you started. So you might want to break it down into, first of all, items that are hanging. So you might go through all your shirts or all your blouses, your trousers, or you might go for jumpers or t-shirts, or your underwear drawer, your sock drawer. So start on one area. So maybe, you get all your socks out, and first of all you try pairing them up, see what condition they're in, and start on one area within that category.
Yeah, that's a brilliant idea, because I've definitely done that, where I've just literally everything's gone on my bed and I'm like, I'm really tired now, and I go and sleep in another bed for about a week.
Yeah, no, I mean, I really would say, particularly in lockdown, everyone's going to have different things going on. Some people, it might be quite quiet and peaceful. Others might have people working at home, or you've got children there. So I would just say start small, and so you can tackle that one job, and then you might choose to wait a few days and come back and do the next thing. Don't feel you've got to sort of push yourself and declutter the whole room in one hit.
Yeah. And then when you go in and declutter a room, do you think about a certain thing you're trying to achieve, i.e., okay, I only want these size clothes, or I only want this standard of clothing, or I want to reduce my clothing by 20%, or is there kind of a very strong thing you have in mind when you declutter?
No, I mean, when I declutter, it is very much listening to the client and hearing what they have to say, what they would like to achieve. And I mean, as we're going through items, obviously if they're holes or they're bobbly, and it's between the bobbly jumper and the non-bobbly jumper, you might choose the one that's in a better condition. But everybody, again, has very different outlook on what they want to achieve, or what they want to wear, or how they want to look. So it's more about listening to the client and hearing what they would like. But where things, buttons have come off, or things have looked really worn, I think as people go through, they naturally, or they try things on, and they realize actually it is very ill-fitting now. I was working with a lady recently, and she's now retired, but she had formal clothing that went back over many years, and various children had got married, and she had wedding outfits. She had an amazing array of shoes, but she now finds that flat shoes are comfortable. She just doesn't need that sort of clothing, and it was absolutely filling up her wardrobe. So she decided that she did, she was going to let that go, and she didn't need those items in her wardrobe. And I think that we tend to go for the same few items in our wardrobe, and then there's all this other stuff in there, and so it's I think people find it really helpful just actually getting it out, holding it, trying it on, seeing if it actually fits, or if it, whether you're still shoulder pads, they're I don't know, they're in now, but it's amazing actually how quickly styles do subtly change, and so they're there, you like them, but you're just not going to wear them anymore.
And we have quite a strong memory with clothes as well, don't we? We can think, I had such a good night with that particular item, or a really good holiday. And so that can be a reason why we don't want to let go as well, because we associate it with good memories.
Absolutely. I mean, that's another area, you're talking about memories. I do a lot of memory boxes with people. It might be that for your children, so you might have items from, their first birthday cards, their first shoes, a favorite teddy, or a particular little outfit. But also for adults too, we might have, as you were just talking about, a favorite piece of clothing that has a really sort of positive memory that you might like to keep. So I encourage people, as they're going through things, that if it does have it's not something they would use or wear anymore, but it's got a very strong memory, I would suggest putting that to one side in a pile, and then at a separate time, then going through the sort of memory boxes and working out what you do want to keep and how you'd like to keep it.
I love that. I love the memory box idea. I mean, I have kept a few things of Angelique's, my daughter, she's 10 now, in a box, but I have a whole loft full of clothes that stem from 0 to 8. We moved out here when she was 8, so I really need to go through them, and I'm kind of like, I love those clothes, I don't want to, and some of them I've got rid of, but I am looking at all the clothes. Before we left, I was like, okay, I really don't need to keep all these. So would you suggest that I take a few of them and put them in the memory box?
Absolutely. And there's some great things. Either you can just keep them in the memory box. I've got 3 children and they each have a memory box with favorite clothing in them. But you can also have things made into a bear out of the fabric. So if as a favorite baby grow, you could have a little bear made up.
Oh, I love that.
Or you can have, a cushion made. I've seen some great ones of school uniforms. So it's sort of got the school badge on it, and it's got the tie. So there are things that you could then be creative with, and then that could sort of sit on your daughter's bed.
Yeah.
And which is a lovely thing to do.
Yeah. And you've got a bear, haven't you?
I have.
Show us your bear.
Where's my bear? This is a bear my sister had made I'm one of 5 children. And in actual fact, this is a memory bear from my parents. So it's a sweatshirt that they both had one of. They used to go on a particular pilgrimage each year, and they would wear these sweatshirts. So she had a bear made up in the fabric for each of us. So that's a nice way to sort of remember someone, a loved one. Which is a lovely thing to do as well.
And you were saying also that sometimes you can get bears that have like a compartment within them that you can put keepsakes.
Yes. So you could put a special little item within that.
That is fantastic.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the isolation period then, and what particular situations people are getting themselves into. Because when we were speaking off air, you were saying that we need to create new spaces maybe for exercise or yoga. We need to create new spaces for homeschooling. What would you advise for people to do just to be able to cope?
I think it's working out, first of all, what space you've got and then what you need to use it for. So let's say you've got your a dining area, which you eat, you're all having your meals at, but also the children are now going to be doing their schoolwork there, and at times you might need to be doing some work there. So what you want to do is have the items that you need for that space, that you can store those conveniently, but can be moved away to one side. So if it's the children, they can bring down their basket and their books and set up, and then when they're finished, they put them back into a basket or a container, and that's moved to one side, or take them back to their bedrooms. And then you might set up for your workspace. So I think it's recognizing what space you need, and then also planning, what time of day people are going to be using that space. So it could be, in the sitting room, the children, in the afternoon, they're allowed to watch a program each. And then after that, you might want to do your exercise. So then they would vacate the room and you'd be able to sort of roll your mat out. But it's making sort of zones, but recognizing the different times you want to use that, and then being able to pack things down and put away again. So the space doesn't become cluttered with everybody's stuff there the whole time.
Yeah, that is such a good point, because, we've been homeschooling Angelique. She's had her books on the dining table. We've then kind of pushed the books and then eaten around it. And then when the parlour books have got too much, we were like, oh, we'll have to sit on the sofa. And it's really not a nice environment to do that. And that's a brilliant idea, just simply getting a basket. That's the time you're on there. That's the time you're off there.
Yeah. It doesn't take long to do that, but just, tidying up once you've finished what you set out to do. And
then let's talk about the kitchen then, because the kitchen, I find, and what I find really fascinating about decluttering is with anybody, like with Angelique, if she has a clean and tidy bedroom, she will play with all of her toys. She'll play with everything in there. If it's a mess, she doesn't play with anything. She literally doesn't even want to go into her room. And I think we're all kind of similar, aren't we? The same with clothes. If we just, like you were saying, well, I go out and buy a load of new clothes because we can't even see the clothes we've got. And with a kitchen, if our kitchen's a mess, I don't feel like cooking at all. I don't feel inspired. I don't feel creative. I'm just like, oh, just give me something that's really quick, something tinned, because I can't be bothered to cook. And I teach cooking, and I help people with healthy eating, but that's something that happens to me all the time. If it's not tidy, I get. So what do we do to get a really nicely organized kitchen?
Well, I think, again, it's working out what space you've got. Everybody's got a different amount of space. Some people have a lot of surface space. Others have very limited surface space. So it's working out and using the space you have got to the best that you can. So again, if you wanted to go through decluttering, you might start by going through each cupboard or drawer and just getting things out and just actually having a look and thinking, do I use those things regularly? Are those things that I do want to keep? And so first of all, I would declutter. So anything that you don't want, I would, put in one box, ready to go. Then you might have items that you do use. Let's say at Christmas, you get the special sort of trifle dish out, or there are certain things that you for when you're entertaining, but you don't need it for everyday things. So again, they could go in higher cupboards or cupboards further away. That you might sort of put behind other things. But so you want your actual space that you're using regularly to be things that you're, every day those things are being used. You want to be able to sort of get to them and trying not to have too much jammed in any one cupboard. So in actual fact, and also trying to zone it. So you might have, I have a drawer for baking, and that's got the baking trays, the blueproof paper, the cutters, etc. in there. It's zoning areas that also, so when you decide what you're going to do, it's sort of all in one place.
That's a great idea. One thing I've done is since we moved to Portugal, actually, I used to use lots of Kilner jars, and I didn't want to obviously ship them all over. So when we got here, I just started buying lots of things that were made out of glass jars, like chickpeas and jams and stuff like that. And then I emptied all my, once we finished it, I cleaned it and then took the label off. And Angelique and I like decorating all these glass jars. But now I use all those glass jars for raisins and nuts and seeds because I use them quite a lot. And what I was finding in the UK was that I created little boxes with the packets in, but then I take the packets out and the nuts and seeds would fly all over the place. The cupboard would be full of nuts and seeds, and that they'd all end up going off because there was so much I couldn't see it. So I have all the glass jars out on one counter now, so I can just pick them up and untwist them very quickly.
I think. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, go for it. No, that was it.
No, I was just going to say that again, it's a preference. Some people love to have jars, and there have been famous people who have had their larders posted on the internet, and everybody would love to have a larder like that, but one to walk in, which actually is quite unrealistic.
Yes.
So absolutely, keeping things in a jar can be very helpful because, as you say, it stops sort of things spilling. Other clients I've worked with actually just prefer to make sure they seal, like you can get clips to put across things.
Yes.
But it's breaking things down. So when you talked about sort of the seeds and nuts, you might within your cupboard have a little basket or tray that you've got your raisins, your nuts, etc. So you bring that out, and then you can take then you can have a look and see what you got and take that item out and either unclip it or undo the jar. And also it means that rather than trying to get behind things in the cupboards that can become difficult, it's almost like a drawer that can come out. Can be very helpful. And also another thing you can use jars for is empty jars once you've finished with the item is actually for storing excess food. So if you've got stuff left over, rather than using Tupperware, little jam jars with the lid on in the fridge work brilliantly as well.
That's a great idea. Yeah, because you can get tiny little pots, can't you? And you can end up wasting so much food.
Yeah.
The other area that I've struggled with in the past is herbs and spices, because I've ended up putting them all in a box. We've never had a particularly big kitchen, so I've ended up putting them all in the box. And then every time, the dried ones, you're just like, oh God, I've got to find cinnamon, which is right at the bottom. So what I did recently, and I don't know why I've not thought of this before, but I've just put them all in a drawer. So
Yep.
I can, and I've labeled the ones that haven't got labeling on the top, so I can actually just see them all.
Yep. No, that's brilliant. Drawers are great, actually. I mean, and more kitchens sort of have those these sort of spaces, drawers, rather than cupboards, and it's a really nice way of storing food, and particularly herbs. And as you say, a lot of herbs you buy now, they do generally write it on the top. But if you don't have a drawer, again, you can use baskets. So I've got some great baskets that if your shelving's quite high, it's got a little sort of handle on it, so you can lift up and reach it and bring it down, and then have them stored in those. And again, you can then see on the top what items you've got.
Brilliant idea. Where'd you get them from?
They're from Lakeland.
Oh, Lakeland's amazing.
I have a few favourite shops. Lakeland's one of them, and Muji is another one for storage containers and things.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, it's been so interesting, Catherine. What's your website? Where do people find you?
So my website is catherinebennett.co.uk. So you'd find me there.
And if people were going to contact you to maybe arrange a consultation, how would you do it in the lockdown period? Would you would people sort of walk you around their house via phone? Because you do Skype or FaceTime consultations now, don't you?
I do. I mean, so obviously during lockdown, I'm working with my clients online, which is obviously very different to being there with them.
Yeah.
And so yes, I can do online consultations or a decluttering session online with you.
So you do a mixture, so you do like just one session or a whole day, or like you were saying, you have one couple that you've been working with for 3 years, so there's like various.
I mean, I have quite a few regular clients. Some are weekly, some are monthly, some are termly. So I have one lady who's she works full time. She's a single mum. And so once a term I would go and we would sort of declutter the house and sort of, all the stuff that comes in from the children from school and from birthdays and Christmas. So we sort of go through once a term, and we go through the house together.
Fabulous.
And I have other people I do a lot of paperwork with. And I was going to say, during lockdown, sorting out your digital, the digital folders on your computer or emails, photo organizing. They're things that can be done without creating a lot of stuff to then have to discard or get rid of.
Yeah, because that's a great point. I mean, decluttering isn't just about things in your house. It's your handbag, it's your computer, it's your phone.
Yes, exactly. And I would just like to say, if anyone is going to kind of give decluttering a go, and at home, what I would say is there's a few steps that I would try and follow. So the first one is sort it. So it's working out what you want to keep, and it's grouping items together like with like. And then you can ask yourself, do I want to keep it? And if I do want to keep it, where I'd like to actually store it? Is it useful? Is it important to me? So is it going, in a keepsake box, or is it actually going to be functional or displayed? And where I want to keep it. And then you want to think about what I want to keep it in. So, have I got a cupboard or a space to keep it? Do I need to order some storage? I would definitely not order storage until you've done the decluttering process, because you don't know what you need to store and where you're going to store it. Once you've gone through those first few steps, you can then actually think, oh, I've got something I could use, or you can then look for something specific for that.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
And then it's where you want to discard things too, whether it's charity or you're going to give it away or you want to sell it. I would just say, apart from 2 people I've worked with, I often go to people's houses and they've got all these items that they want to sell. And I work with them for a period of time, and that pile sits there and it sits there. So a lot of people have the intention to do that, but actually don't get around to it, and then it becomes clutter. So try, if you are going to, and again, while you're in lockdown, if you can post things anyway, you might like to try sort of uploading and selling some items.
Yeah, that's a great point. I've done that in the past. I've created my eBay bag and it's just sat there for months. I actually found somebody who sells on eBay for you and then takes like 50%. But that actually for me worked better because I could never be bothered to.
No, I mean, there are people out there who will do that too.
Yeah.
But you could get, your kids to be, or, your
Good
teenagers to be
idea.
doing that for you
Yeah.
at this moment.
Yeah.
And then it's keep it up. So once you've got a system going, just keep it up, put things back where they belong. Maybe if it's at the end of the day, you just have sort of 5 minutes sort of tidying up and just trying to take things back to where they came from.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I think that is it's creating those new habits, isn't it? It's like saying, no, every time before I go to bed, I wake up in the morning to a tidy space rather than having to do it at different random times of the day. Thank you. That was so interesting. Really, really fascinating. Thanks so much. So it's catherinebennett.co.uk, and Bennett is spelt with double N and double T.
It is indeed.
Yes. Yeah. Brilliant.
Well, thank you for having me on, Christianne.
You're very welcome. Lovely to see you.
Right.
And I'll speak soon. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, well done. That was great. I realised I